Welcome to JSA TV and JSA Podcasts, the newsroom for telecom and data center professionals. I'm Jean-Marc Lehmann. Joining me today is Andrew Stevens, President and CEO of CNet Training, to talk us through the data center talent gap. Andrew, thank you so much for talking to us. How serious is this current talent gap that we've got in the data center space?
Hi, thank you. It's really serious. It really is a challenge. It's something that we started talking about 10, 15 years ago. And at the time, it was just, I think, largely thought of as a problem that would solve itself, but it hasn't, and it's getting worse. We've got an aging workforce that are all set to retire. We've got inflated salaries. We've got organisations trying to recruit from the same spaces, and no one is really looking at where the problem is. And the problem is we're an industry that's unknown, and everyone talks about this, but we've got to do something about it. So we've got to get together and try to, first of all, understand the size of the problem, I think.
How big would you say the problem is? I mean, do you have numbers?
No, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to put numbers on. But I mean, if you talk to any of the data center companies, but also the supply chain. I mean, this is something that we don't talk about. The supply chain to these DC builds, these DC moves, they're struggling. And often the supply chain doesn't have the ability to pay the salaries that maybe the sort of, let me call them the end user, because in this case they are the provider of the service and they are the ultimate employer. And so those companies in the supply chain just can't find the people either. So it is significant. It's affecting everybody, and we're also, of course, in a particular period where other industries are suffering shortages as well. So, where we're looking for these people, we're in a competitive place, and we're in a competitive place with industries that are well known and recognised. And the influence for choosing a career path or choosing an industry, it starts very, very young. Obviously, with your parents, close family, what they've all got involved in, and we have a pretty small community that starts from. And certainly, we always smile and joke if you're at a dinner party and someone asks you what you do, and you tell them you're in the data center industry, they glaze over. So it's really hard. It's really hard. We've got to come together as an industry. This is one of those topics where, similar to climate change, similar to sustainability, no organisation can do this on their own. And we've really, really got to be effective and focus on how we solve the problem, and not focus too heavily on trying to solve it now in the immediacy, because we can't solve the immediate problem. We're going to have to work through it and build a talent pipeline that has to go back to school. And we've got to engage with schools. We've got to have correct programs to attract people to this industry.
That's very interesting. I mean, you brought up quite a lot of different topics there, especially the holistic view, not just within the data center, but bringing the other industries that are related to the data center, the indirect industry that work with us, the supply chain especially. I think that came to light even more during COVID. And we're seeing some crises in other industries now, especially in the UK. You've got a London background, so you'll know well the energy crisis because of the truck drivers. I mean, it's a very interesting era, but it's interesting that you also say that we need to prepare the future generations. So go back to school and start with children. Is CNET doing anything around that, or is CNET more focused on the university level?
No. I mean, we do believe that you've got to really get involved at the school level. We've been one of the driving forces behind the opening of the first university technical college here in the UK. It's going to be based down at Heathrow, and its main topic is data center engineering. Now, that addresses children from the ages of 14 through to 18. And then, of course, there's some pathways therefore open to them. But in fact, we've got to go further back. We've got to really start to get children to understand STEM, because ultimately, we're a STEM industry. So we've really got to encourage STEM. And of course, this then links in really closely with the diversity in all factors, because if we get the STEM message right in at schools where there might be deprived areas, not just the hubs, we can start to really address the diversity issue as well. So all of the members of staff at CNET are STEM ambassadors. We give them a number of days a year as sort of additional time off to go and work in schools and colleges, just to promote the industry. Now, clearly, we don't want to be going in there and starting to talk technical or trying to overdo it, but what we've actually got to do is just highlight that their digital life is run on the platforms that they could become involved in the future to shape and develop and work. And it's quite exciting. So you have to obviously get the message correct, but you've got to make it interesting enough to draw those individuals into thinking STEM, technology, internet, those kind of things. And then this is where it all runs. And hopefully we can attract people. Of course, we've got to stop talking about just the engineering element as well, because that's one of the areas, because there's a huge numbers of jobs in sales, marketing, HR, finance that are involved in the data center industry as well. And therefore we've got to highlight those. So it's a broad brush, but we've got to do it together, and we've got to encourage the trade associations, for example, around the world, really to come together and start to have a sort of a global approach to, this is the messages we want to get across, let's all do our bit, and then we can start to influence it over a period. But it's going to take 10 years. It's going to take 10 years, if not a bit longer, to really start to make a meaningful difference. And we've got a lot of work to do in the meantime. Obviously, you asked the question as to what else we're doing. We've been working with the military resettlement market for the last 25 years since we started out. And, we have to work with the military. The military in the UK in particular has a different approach now to its resettlement. Previously, it was a bit of a sort of a scenario where if you decided to leave the military, you weren't treated favourably. Now the military is seen, and really what they're trying to do from the beginning of a military career is explain to individuals that they will ultimately have two careers. They will have their military career, and then they will have their civilian career. And what we need to be doing is helping them during their military career to get the qualifications, to undertake the programs, maybe to do some work placement and all of those kinds of things to start to build another pipeline. The military won't solve the problem on its own, but it's one of those many.
It helps a little bit. Sorry, I was just saying it helps a little bit. Sorry, carry on.
Yes, no, and it does help a little bit. And of course, you're bringing military personnel in that have maybe already trained and operated. So the Royal Signals, for example, in the UK, many of them have worked on data centres that maybe look a bit different to what we see in and around London and Slough, but they're still functionally the same type of beast. And those individuals. So we've got to look at that. Then we've got to look at alternative industries. But we've got to look at broader than alternative industries. We've got to get our teams and our people to really understand what transferable skills means. One of the challenges I've had over the last 25 years is that in academia, in education, there is a whole language that many people outside of that don't understand. No difference to the data center. We have our own language, we have our own acronyms. But people have sometimes forgotten their own educational path and what that means, and what a bachelor's degree actually means, and then where can you see in apprenticeships, or as I prefer to call them, careerships, how can that fit into what we're doing, and start to not look for DC skills. As I think I've said many times, is I get so frustrated when I see a job advert for a data center technician that requires a bachelor's degree or 5 years experience. If we keep on asking those questions, we're not going to fill the gaps, because someone with great engineering skills can easily work in a data center with some assistance. You can't leave them on their own, but we certainly can put the things in place to transfer people over relatively quickly. But also, let's not, in our industry, over-egg it. Let's not try to say we need people with certain skills when we don't. Let's understand what skills we need, and the appropriate skills, and be able to find ways to identify those as well.
I mean, that's very interesting, and I guess bringing thinking outside the box as well into the data center space, especially such a pivotal moment that we are in with all the new technologies and how we're building data centers lately. And I mean, even with COVID, the whole different kind of marketing campaigns we're going to put together. I guess the industry can really benefit from bringing people from outside the industry into our sector with transferable skills to really help build the brand into the next stage.
In terms of addressing the skills gap, we do focus very, for the conversation we have here about what can we do, we are focusing a lot of our efforts on the UK market. because every country has its own educational system, has different ways of funding that educational system, different ages for transferring between colleges and schools, etc. So we do focus on that. However, one of the things we do think is that things like the content or curriculum that we would be using in the university technical college, we should make that freely available to other colleges, other schools, and really have that out there so that people can use the same information, use the same templates, so we can start to get the message across. And we have started to work with iMasons quite a lot, and obviously they're offering scholarships to people coming in from other industries, so that's proving to be very, very effective, and they're certainly putting a lot of work into making that happen. And of course they're also helping address the diversity issue with the way in which they're offering those scholarships. So we can and we do bits and pieces around the world, but obviously we're trying to focus that particular core element in the UK.
Okay. And you've said this is going to be a 10-year journey. What do you envision in 10 years' time the data center space to be like?
Well, it'll be more automated. I think it will have calmed down in terms of our own self-belief. I think there is a bit too much within our industry of saying how good we are and how difficult it is to get people and those kind of things. So I think if I were to phrase it, I think it will normalise over a period. Yes, there'll be growth. Yes, there'll still be demand, but I think technology will assist in that. But I also do believe that we will start to see students coming into the industry, because I think the industry is now beginning to be recognised. People are talking about it. As terrible as COVID has been, it certainly has highlighted in some areas, not the data center industry, but the technology that sits in the data center industry, Zoom and Teams and all those things. And people have experienced different things now. They still don't know how it works, and they may forget it. So it is our job just to keep the message going. But I think it will normalise. I think it will become more of a traditional industry. I think there will be apprenticeships and careerships that come into place. And I think some of the universities and colleges will stop just teaching IT. In those cases, they will broaden this out, and the smart building revolution as well, I think, will assist in, what is a smart building? Is a data center a smart building, or is an office block a smart building, or actually are there similar technologies, just slightly different purposes? So I think that's what will happen over the next 10 years. But I think we will always be facing a bit of a skills crisis, because I think that's a macroeconomic issue. I think it's a global issue, and I think that one of the areas of difficulty is largely the funding of FE colleges and how those are put together, because it makes it very difficult for further education and higher education establishments and schools and colleges to be able to fund the development of curriculum and keep it up to date and keep it changing. That is one of their biggest challenges. And I think we, again, as an industry, have got to look at how can we provide that curriculum across all those areas and keep it fresh and keep it moving.
Well, would you like to see the government more involved in that? Because I guess they are backing some of the STEM subjects, but would you like to see something a bit more niche into certain industries, not even just data centers, but would you like to see the government more involved?
I think so. I think government, does need to be more involved, and I think government has to start to really listen to industry sectors as about what they require. Certainly, here in the UK, education policy over the last 25 years has changed, numerous times, and sometimes, a complete 180-degree turnaround. However, I think here in the UK now, with the development of apprenticeships, and the new way in which they are delivered. As I said, I would prefer to them to be called careerships, because now in the UK, anybody of any age can undertake an apprenticeship, and it is either nearly fully funded by government or funded by a levy, which large organisations have to pay regardless, and they have an account that they create and the money goes into that. So I think organisations as well have got to come closer to government and have got to start to learn a little bit more about the system that provides them the people. Often when I go in and talking to executives, as I alluded to, I'm talking about level 5 apprenticeships, level 6 apprenticeships, and they're looking at me blankly thinking, I've no idea what you're talking about. Can you explain it to me? And of course, I do explain it to them, but then they've got to go off and explain it to their teams, and you get Chinese whispers, and by the time you sort of you get round to the final conversation with people, it appears to have become complicated. And so that's one of the things I think we've got to do, is try and bring this message together that, everybody that comes into this industry will have passed through academia, will have gone through the education system. So as employers, we've got to understand what that education system can offer to us. And we've got to work closer with the colleges and the schools that are in your area and try to engage. I personally think that there should be a schools engagement officer or college engagement officer. Their job is purely to keep those local schools and colleges engaged with the industry. And I think that would be exciting, and have somebody within the organisation as well that other people can go to and say to, explain apprenticeships to me, tell me about FE colleges, because it is difficult to sort of understand the whole process and what organisations can and can't do.
That's interesting. I like the idea of the chief engagement officer. But Andrew, some people still say that we don't need to educate people outside the industry about our industry, which consequently would then bring people to work with us. And some people also say that in a few years' time, in a few decades, we won't even need humans working in the data center because there'll be AI. Just quickly, what would you have to say about those two things to people that say that?
I think predictions along those lines are incredibly dangerous. Only 2 years ago or 18 months ago, there were many, many people saying the office is dead. No one's ever going to return to an office ever again. Let's rip them all down. Well, 18 months on, people are returning to the office. I think AI, will obviously have an impact, but data centers are growing. There are more of them. There are still an awful lot of legacy and enterprise data centers out there. There are clients that are moving out of colo back to their own facilities. There's all sorts of change. So I think, 25 years from now, really who knows? But, AI is not going to remove the human from the data center on a global scale anytime soon. Things will change, but then there'll be other roles, other deployments. You may refer to it as sort of the hollowing out effect. There may be some roles that are replaced, but certainly with the skills crisis that we've got, those people will just be moving into slightly different roles. And who knows what the next edge is going to do? Who knows what the impact of local deployment and when new technology comes along. So I think it's a long way away before we don't have humans in the data centers in scale.
All right, we got time. And Andrew, if people want to find out more about CNET, where can they go and how can they get in touch with you?
Our website, which is cnet-training.com, is probably the best place to go. We have all of the information about individual courses and programs and schedules and detailed program overviews, but also follow us on Twitter and obviously find us on LinkedIn as well.
All right, great place to be. Andrew, thank you so much for your time, and thank you our viewers as well for tuning into JSA TV and JSA podcasts. And don't forget to check our social media channels for more content. Until next time, happy networking.
Thank you.